they told me 2 o'clock, so that chair is to be occupied by Nancy Purbeck, but she thinks it's 2 o'clock, so I hope she'll come in. Hello, there's no need to fear. Underdog is here. I have this speech I always take out, which I never look at. I usually forget everything that's on here. Good. That's a good idea. I want to talk to you about the book, How Underdog Was Born, which I hope you'll buy if you haven't already. And not only because I think you'll be entertained by the book, but because all the author's royalties, money Chet and I might have made, my partner and I, go to Victory Over Violence, a nonprofit organization based in Boston. And Nancy Purbeck is the founder and current president of that organization. And the reason it's proper that all the author's royalties go there is because we never would have written a book if she hadn't kept after us. You know, it was 40 years after the fact, after we created it. You know, we thought, what the heck are we going to remember anyway, you know? And, but she just kept on. The people will enjoy it. There are people out there who are fans. You have to do this, you have to write it. So, and Chet was even more reluctant than I was. So anyway, we finally wrote it. So it's, I think, delightful that the profits do go to the organization she heads up, Victory Over Violence. As for the book itself, I was going to have her stand up, Nancy. The book itself, we've had letters and comments from people about the book. And one of the reasons that particularly creative people seem to like it is that it's so detailed on the creative process. And you know, you create something and you look back, heck, I don't know, 6 months later, much less 40 years later, and well, wait a minute, why did we take that turn? How did we happen to go from here to there? And it's very difficult to pinpoint. But for us, we were both advertising people. We worked for the same advertising agency. And at an advertising agency, you have to keep records. I mean, you know, you go to lunch with the client. While you're at lunch, you've got to make notes so that you can report it on the conference report. And we had learned to take those kind of notes, so we took them as we created series. And so when we finally got talked into writing the book, we had all these old notes we'd kept. It was actually fun, you know. You look back and say, is that what we did? So we had all that. So we had a record that you don't usually have for the creative process. I know I'm a writer. I've written other books. I've written novels. I couldn't tell you how I got from here to there after the fact. But in this case, we could. So I think that's made it interesting. Of course, even with the notes, it could have been a bore. It was not our first series. You'd think that it would just like be a breeze. You'd know what's going to happen. We had created King Leonardo on his short subjects. That's the most unheard of thing I ever heard of. That was King Leonardo. And then we had we created Tennessee Tuxedo. All right, Chumley, Tennessee Tuxedo will not fail. So we had, this was, as I say, our third series, not our first. So it could have gone like clockwork. Instead, it turned out to be what we call our Twilight Zone episode. Nothing went the way we expected it to. Absolutely nothing. I couldn't sit up here and tell you all the things that are in the book, and I hope you'll buy it. Victory Over Violence deserves it. But they are in the book. But I think one of the reasons that it was so different that we hadn't expected is it was the first time we had been in a competition to create a series. I think that changed the whole road, as it were. It started to turn from that moment on. I went into New York June of 1963 for a meeting with my old boss, Gordon Johnson. Now, Gordon was the account supervisor for all General Mills cereals except Wheaties. Wheaties was handled in Minneapolis. But anyway, all our shows were sold to General Mills, sold outright. They bought all the United States rights. So he called me, and we had been working on Tennessee Tuxedo, which hadn't gone on the air yet, but was going to go on. And so when I got there, he said to me, good news. For General Mills, we've already bought 2 new time slots for next year. We need 2 new series. So I thought, oh boy, we're gonna get 2 series. This is really great. But that was not it. He said, we've already told Ward and Scott. Now, Ward and Scott did Rocky and Bullwinkle, if any of you are familiar with that. So they were the only team, other creative team, that was using the same animation base we were, which was Gamma Studios down in Mexico. So anyway, he said, what we're going to do is, we've already told Ward and Scott they should come up with a new series. And now we're telling you to come up with a new series. And if General Mills likes both of them, which we hope they will, and we do as the agency before giving it to them, we'll take the one they like best and put it on NBC, and the one they like least and put it on ABC. Now that may not mean much today, but ABC in those days was, here she is, Nancy Purbeck, just as I mentioned. So we'll put the worst one on ABC, because I say it was not, in those days, 1963, it was not much of a network. Why don't you come up here and sit? It was not much of a network. And NBC was the network. That's where you wanted to be. Of course, CBS was too, but our choice was either, assume they liked our series at all, our choice was either NBC or ABC. So I said, oh, okay. So we're in competition with Ward and Scott. I said, so are there any ground rules? He says, wide open. Any kind of series, any kind. You got to have animals. Of course, General Mills insisted that your key characters be animals. And he said, it's got to be animals. And oh, yeah, no frogs. Who the heck would think about frogs anyway? No frogs. I said, what's that about? He said, well, Ward and Scott, Jay Ward, already told us that their series is going to star a frog. So I said, okay, no frogs. He said, but I'm warning you, Buck, I'm telling you right now, you gotta have a super series if you want to win this, because it's only a super series that's going to get the top spot. I said, okay, we got it. And he gave me a pretty fast deadline. I think it was a 4-week turnaround that we had to make our first presentation to him, a rough presentation. So, excuse me. Good.
And in this world, the headlines read of those whose hearts are filled with greed, who rob and steal from those who need them, to the spot with blinding speed goes Underdog, Underdog. Great speed of lightning, roar of thunder, fighting all who rob or plunder. Underdog, bum, bum, bum. Yeah, Underdog. Yay! And forgive me for interrupting. Yay! But also, if you all may know, he actually wrote all of those lyrics and the song on his little old piano at Cape Cod.
Black piano.
So he's not only the co-creator, but he's also a very gifted composer.
Thank you so much for the.
Forgive me for my interruption.
That's why I have her here at the table.
I'm filling in the real details because, as we know, Underdog was humble and lovable. Humble.
So I went back to Cape Cod, where I was living at the time, and went on up to, Chet and I met only once a week. Chet Stover's partner, who created all our series with me. Anyway, we met once a week in Framingham, Massachusetts, at a place called the 1812 House. So we met there this week, and he knew I'd had the meeting with Gordon, but I hadn't told him what it was about. So we had to do our usual work. You know, the series we had plotted the week before, we had written them individually. Now we had to go over those and agree that everything was fine. And then we had to plot maybe 2 new Tennessees or a Hunter or some of the other episodes. So we got through all that, and then we finally got to our lunch. And so he said, okay. I'm seeing that grin on your face. I know you got something to say. What the heck happened with Gordon? So I told him, and I remember him, no frogs. And I said, yeah, Gordon said that Jay Ward's going to use a frog for his chief character in his new series. So Chet said to me, Nancy hates this joke. Chet said to me, well, you know what that means, don't you? They've already got the jump on us.
But it was Chet's joke.
So he said, what are the guidelines? I said, no guidelines except that. He just said it's got to be a super series if we want to win the spot, and no frogs. And that's it. And the world is our oyster. The series can take place anywhere, outer space, under space, in the United States, England, you know, anything, and any kind of series. Boy, that's wonderful. And no guidelines of any kind. That's it. A super series and no frogs. So we were really excited. I laid down the suggestion for what we would do. We'd come up with each come up with 5 new series, and the following week with those 10, we'd hone it down to 2 and really finish one and keep one in our back pockets, just so, sometimes you take a presentation out and it just tanks right there, and you better have something else in your pocket just in case. So,
could I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I just did.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when you said this about, I know, a super series, he said this just like Simon Bar Sinister. Do you all remember Simon Bar Sinister?
Okay, anyway.
And do just a little 2-second of Simon Bar Sinister. Because he had to pitch it.
All right, underdog. Simon says, go snow.
So forgive me. He's not only the underdog, he's the Simon, he's all of the characters. He pitched them all.
Someone earlier saying Simon says stronger cell phones.
Oh!
You missed that. So where the heck was it? Okay. So that's it. We were each going to come up with 5 new series. So we went home, did our regular work during the week, and then came back the following week. And when we came back, we knew that the other partner had changed spirit. But we didn't even speak on the phone that week. But somehow both of us had turned from way up here, the world is our oyster, to way down here. And we didn't talk about it until lunch, when we finally admitted that what happened with the world is our oyster, any kind of series you want, it now meant, what good is that? We had come up with some great ideas, like one was the Empire State Building is Alive, which was really a great series idea. And If I Were Humphrey Bogart, that was another one. And The Second Greatest Show on Earth. I remember those 3. Anyway, we had 10 great ideas, but what the heck? We could come up with 50 more. So what? Where do you hone in? Why? Any series, anywhere in the world, any kind, any type. It turned out that now that any kind of series was no guidelines. And all of a sudden, Jay Ward's, we laughed about Jay Ward's frog. Now all of a sudden we realized he'd already told General Mills he must be out there already. He had great contacts at the mills. He must be out there already pre-selling them. We didn't have a prayer. We were already doomed before we started work. So we said, we've got to have some kind of guidelines. We'll have to create our own guidelines. So go back to the meeting with Gordon Johnson. What exactly did he say? And I said, he said no frogs, and a super series. So that was it. We took a super series. All of a sudden, we decided we'd never done a superhero. So the word superhero, I only got on, we'll do a superhero. But right away, we knew we could never do a serious super. We'd go crazy. We couldn't write like that. It would be something we'd hate. So we wanted to do a superhero series that could be taken as for real with young kids, little kids, and taken as camp for older kids and adults. You had to sell to adults, you know, as well as the kids. In those days, there was only one TV set in the house, you know, in most homes. So, you know, if the older brother didn't like it, the little brother didn't get to watch it, you know, if the mother hated it, she'd turn the set off or change to something else. So we were, as well as you sold to adults, and you know, you wouldn't think so, but you go out and sell to people at General Mills, a big audience like this, you're selling to these people, and if they don't laugh, you can't say to them, oh, you don't laugh, but the kids will laugh. They think that's very, forget it. You got to make them laugh. So we decided our super series would be, if you think about it, like Superman, any of those characters, they come crashing through the roof and nothing ever happens. But we'd have the ceiling fall on all the people. You know, they come crashing. Our hero would crash into the bank, and the ceiling would fall on the people, and they'd shoot bullets. Criminals would shoot bullets at it, and the bullets would ricochet off and nearly hit all the people that were around. And so we would do all that kind of stuff. And we decided we wouldn't have a typical superhero. We would have one that was a 98-pound weakling. In those days, there was a strong man called Charles Atlas, and you used to see all these ads with his holding up like it. And he always talked about, don't get sand kicked in your face like a 98-pound weakling. So we decided we'd have the 98-pound weakling who looked like he'd get sand kicked in his face. So we thought that was funny. So we had some ground rules, but we didn't have enough. We didn't have any name, and we didn't know exactly where we were going. So we said, okay, we'll go home, and we'll this time come up with 10 animal superhero titles. And then when we get back, we'll look at those and hone it down to one or two. And also, because of what had happened with Tennessee Tuxedo, when we found the voice, and Don Adams, we found him before we had anything. He gave us the whole idea. We thought he looked like a penguin. And we did the whole series around.
We did. I did.
So now we said we got to be on the lookout for a voice. But to match what we had, the 98-pound weakling and all the comedy stuff, we couldn't think of anybody except one. That was Don Knotts. And we thought, hey, not bad. But his voice, although when you see him, his voice is kind of distinctive, particularly when he was, you know, getting bravado with Andy Griffith. But he was a lot like, in a way, Don Adams, a little close. And so we wanted something that was different. But we couldn't think of anybody. And then that week, a movie came out called Spencer's Mountain, Henry Fonda movie. And actually it was the basis, if you remember, of the Waltons.
Remember
the basis of the Waltons. But in the movie, not in the series, but in the movie, was a reverend played by Wally Cox, our perfect 98-pound weakling. We saw it and we said, that's not only our voice, just like with Don Adams, that's our character. He's going to look like Wally Cox. Our hero is going to look like Wally Cox. So we had that. We were very excited about that. So the next week when we got together, we looked at our 10 titles, you know, things like Super Sheep and Wonder Weasel and Cum Laude Cow. But nothing seemed to fit with Wally Cox. Now we had Wally Cox, and everything else was wrong, you know. It worked fine with the ceiling falling and the ricochet and all that, sticking him in some kind of suit. well, what were we going to do in terms of an animal? We had to have an animal, and what were we going to do in terms of a name? We realized that one thing we'd been focusing on, which was Super Sheep or Wonder Weasel, that it wasn't a super name we needed. It was like Lowly Man or Downtrodden Man. And when we said Downtrodden Man, Chet suddenly said, watch this. Chet suddenly said, give us you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled. Mass is yearning to breathe free. The something refuse of your teeming shores. That's a quote from the Statue of Liberty. Chet was always
The
quoting.
Statue of Liberty.
Chet was always quoting poetry. So anyway, I said, we'll use it. He said, what do you mean? I said, poetry. Our hero, our Wally Cox hero will talk poetry. It'll be beautiful. It's perfect. He said, I like it. I like it. So that was it. We're going to have poetry. But what kind of animal? What kind of name? Well, we worked that whole day. We got nowhere. And just at the end, as we were having lunch, we said, well, there's no doubt about it. We go out to General Mills this time. We're fighting Jay Ward and Bill Scott. We're going to be the underdog. Just like hung in the air, the name. The underdog. Underdog. That looks like Wally Cox. It sounds like Wally Cox. And we wanted something else that I haven't mentioned. We wanted something called topspin. Topspin we learned with Tennessee. You name a character Tennessee, and the kids, anytime they see it in the book or in the newspaper or hear about it, they think of your character. It's free advertising. Now, underdog, you talk about topspin, every sports section in the country, America loves an underdog, you know.
So take a swallow, because don't you love it? I mean, good Lord, I love that. The two of them, I can picture, and Chet would be here now. The two of them are an absolute riot. Just to listen to the two banter back, they act like they did whenever they wrote this a few years ago. But while you're swallowing that, I wanted to ask you if you would mention why you came up with, in Chet's quote from the Statue of Liberty, but tell about, from a creative perspective, why you chose to have poetry be the way that Underdog spoke, or Shoeshine Boy, or whomever.
No, Shoeshine Boy didn't speak in poetry.
Ah, okay.
He didn't speak very much at all, but he didn't speak in poetry. He was invented to keep Underdog's feet on the ground. Shoeshine Boy, keep his feet on the ground.
They
Anyway,
do this all the time. And
anyway.
One would shut the other one down. No.
Anyway, as far as the poetry is concerned, I don't mean this in a bad way, but the poetry thing seemed, particularly at that time, that's many years ago, to kind of go with a 98-pound weakling. I don't know why, but it just seemed to fit. So, and we thought, you know, anytime you can get something that makes writing easier, you want it. Well, poetry, we love that. How many times do you get to write poetry when you're writing cartoon shows, you know? So that was it. It was fun. Anyway.
And I love it because all the proceeds to his book go to
I have already told him that.
Right. But our advocacy has to do with nonviolent communication, and poetry is perfect. Yay. It shows a character of a more gentle nature.
Anyway, the name solved not only all that, but it solved one other thing. We knew what kind of animal we had. After all, you don't have an underdog, it's a sheep or a cat or something. So we had that. And then we went to, we developed a TV reporter, Sweet Polly Purebred. She was a cross between Marilyn Monroe and my French Poodle, which was named, my French Poodle was named Sweet Petunia, but we decided that Petunia was not the right name. So we went to Sweet Polly Purebred, who would, you know, almost every week had lost underdog. Where, oh, where is my underdog gone? Where, oh, where is he gone? So she was great. and she could get in trouble, and he had to save her every time. And then we got, as I said to Simon, we wanted, it's a lot easier each week if you don't have to come to a blank page, look at a blank page and say, what do we do this week? So what we did, we developed 3 types of plots for Underdog. The first was villainous inventor who was always inventing some kind of crazy machine which was going to do something to the world, you know, make everybody laugh or steal all the water or, you know, something. And we wanted the voice of Lionel Barrymore for that, but we didn't know what the name was. And we first came up with Simon Sinister, which sounded okay, but somehow it sounded like it a little too kiddish, like written for 3-year-olds or something. We thought turn off the older boys. So one day, after we'd gotten the idea, about a week later, we suddenly put Barr, just Simon Barr Sinister, and it changed the whole character. I mean, it changed him tremendously. So Lionel Barrymore became Simon Barr Sinister, and that was one type of plot. The second type of plot was the Riff Raff plot, which was a gangster plot, bank holdup, train robbery, something like that. And the third was outer space, like the flying sorcerers or the mole hole men. That kind of. So we had 3 types of plots. So when we get together to write, we didn't say we got a blank sheet of paper. We said this week it's the mole, you know, it's the outer space characters, or this week it's the Simon Barr Sinister, and so forth. So that made it much easier. So we had Riff Raff as a villain, and we had all those outer space villains. So we had our series. So we took it out we first showed it to Gordon Johnson, who flipped, and then we took it out to General Mills, and they'd already seen Warden Scott's show, which was, you may not remember, Hoppity Hooper was the Warden Scott's show. Was the frog. So we showed out, and they just turned cartwheels. We got the NBC slot, and Warden Scott got the ABC slot. And you may remember, if you ever saw Underdog, every week it was, look, up in the sky, it's a plane, it's a bird, it's a frog. A frog? Not plane nor bird, not even frog. It's just little old me, Underdog.
I like it.
So that's what the frog was for.
Yeah.
All right?
No. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. I just had to. I love that.
That's it.
Really? Okay. Well, then I have a question, and it is not one that you're. It has to do with Sweet Polly Purebred, and I will share with all of you that he did something really special for our nonprofit, which is, by the way, all volunteer. So it's no big time overhead, all volunteer. And he created an episode which was a true to form episode of Underdog, and we performed it in Boston.
On the stage, she was Sweet Polly Purebred, and I was Underdog. In this silly-looking costume.
Right.
With socks put on my head for ears.
I put socks because we had a costume designer, but she didn't really.
He didn't get it.
Right. Although the Underdog film, which comes out in August of 2007, I met the new Underdog, which is this adorable beagle.
It's a dog.
It's
a real dog.
Yeah, a beagle. And I looked and I said, oh, his name is Leo. That's a stage name. But he has these black ears like your socks. I said, how did you get the socks to match what I did? I mean, the ears. They tinted them. But
We hope the movie is a success. Hope you like it, but Chet and I had nothing to do with it.
Except that he created.
Yeah, but we sold our rights.
Created.
We sold all our rights about 4 years ago. The only thing we get money on is music. So.
Which he wrote.
We sold to Broadway Video, but they've sold since to, oh gosh, I've lost the name.
But the movie is being produced.
Creative something is the
But
company
it's
they
being
sold.
produced by Disney. So my question goes to you, which you didn't know that I was going to ask you this, but you were talking about Sweet Polly, and since I played her part, I would like you also to explain that about her character, because you were explaining how Polly would always lose this and that and have a hard time reaching in her pocketbook trying to find the underdog ring.
Because she always took it to be washed or cleaned.
Exactly, and her pocketbook might have been full of all kinds of other things. But when I asked you, I said, well, Sweet Polly, I'm trying to get into character, and I thought it was incredible that you designed her as a cross between Marilyn Monroe
I said that
and his
French
poodle.
film.
So I said, but is that sort of the feminist side in me is saying, well, excuse me. And so then his response, I don't know if you remember it.
I don't, but anyway, she was a great TV reporter, and
He said, ace TV reporter.
okay.
He said, excuse me, Polly was a very, very important character.
How else would she get in so much trouble? She was always digging up the stories that nobody else did. So she was a very, very fine TV reporter.
And now I'm going to inject another little trivia, which is that Buck Biggers, whose birth name
Okay,
is
come on.
Watts, also
weren't
was
supposed to
vice
say that.
president of NBC and named the very first female vice president of NBC, whom I met.
Which
And
has nothing to do with the book.
except
But anyway,
that it redeemed that.
can we now see if they have any questions? And
Okay. Just giving you a little inside scoop.
anybody want to ask anything at all?
Any,
I think you, yes.
I know that Wally Cox and Marlon Brando were close friends. As a
Yes.
matter of fact, not to be morbid, but Wally Cox's ashes were found with Brando's estate when he passed on.
Right.
Did were you ever in any of the voice recordings? Did Brando ever drop by or?
No, and you have to understand that the voices for the series, believe it or not, were often not done in the same studio. That is to say, Wally, if he was in New York doing something, or if he was out in Los Angeles doing something, could walk into a studio and cut his lines, sometimes 2 or 3 episodes at a time, and he's talking to nothing but a blank wall or a microphone because nobody's there. And then we edited the lines together. So actually, Wally was not in our presence all that much. In fact, not in my presence, because we had a Treadwell Covington as a partner, and he did recorded all the voice tracks. But no, we never saw, we certainly knew about Marlon, but we never really saw him. We know that Underdog was played by Wally, even in his home for kids or to entertain kids himself. He loved being Underdog.
And you said that you're still getting such as when the theme song, which
Yes.
was on that rock and roll album about 10 years ago, the cartoons greatest.
The Butt Hill
Yes.
Surfers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have that, and I love it. I love it.
It's a great version.
Yeah.
And I talked to, I just told somebody this out there, I think it was you, that I called Disney, the music producer there, with a bigger title than I'm making him out as a big gun, and asked him, is he going to use my theme? And he said, are you kidding? Why, what else would I do? He said, we've already recorded 3 new versions of your theme. So it's all in the movie, so I'll like the movie for that, if nothing else.
Oh, great fun.
Yes,
Other than Wally Cox, who else did voices for the show?
what do you?
What other voice actors worked on Underdog?
Oh, George Irving was the announcer. Norma Macmillan was Sweet Polly Purebred. And then there were just miscellaneous voices after that. We've used voice actors we had used many, many, many times. Those guys, believe me, those guys are great. You know, they're not all Mel Blancs, but they're good. They can do anything you want.
They're the unsung heroes of the animation world.
Huh?
They're the unsung heroes of the
Absolutely, just tremendous. They deserve so much credit. We learned that with our first series, when we had the same voice actor that did Biggie Rat, also did Odie Coloni, and then another one did Itchy Brother and the King. So.
Yes.
That's right.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Oh, there you are. I should know. Thanks. Yes.
What will the
I beg your pardon?
Kenny Delmar, what role did he voice?
Well, when we were first doing our first series, we had a character called the Hunter. You know, that's a joke, son. And so we thought we'll get an imitator to do Senator Claghorn, which is the character that Kenny Delmar had created. But Tread, who lived in New York, said, why not? Why don't we call Kenny and see if he wants to do it himself? So we called him up and he said, oh, thank God you called me. He said, you know, they ripped my voice off in Hollywood all the time. Nobody ever asked me to do it. So he not only did that, but he became Commander McBragg, which was our series, and he did lots of other. Sometimes he was the narrator in some of our series. He became probably one of our biggest voices, and a great guy, nice guy. He's no longer with us, but he was a nice guy. Yes.
Can you tell us something about the process? You write a script and then you storyboard it. Do you do the animation first or the soundtrack first, or how does all that work?
It can work. What I tell you is our way, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way. We went from script to storyboard to soundtrack, sometimes to soundtrack and then storyboard, but usually storyboard and then soundtrack. And then, of course, we were up in the United States called above the line. Then you've got to go below the line, which is Mexico, so we had pre-directors who would take the board and do frames, the individual frames. And then it went to the inkers and painters, or what we call peons then. It's not a very nice title. But anyway, in Mexico. And that was one of the reasons we came into being, because with all that set up down there, when Ward and Scott were doing Rocky and Bullwinkle, they started coming up with jokes like, I remember one Jay Ward had was, he playing Mr. Know-It-All. Hey, Rock, do you know how to start a fire when you're out in the woods with no matches? No, Bullwinkle, or no, Mr. Know-It-All. How do you start a fire? Well, you rub two Boy Scouts together. General Mills didn't like that.
No.
So when they would try to cut something like that out of the script, Ward and Scott would get very upset and stop writing scripts and go on like strike. And what happened then? All the peons are sitting down there ready to ink and paint, and there's nothing to ink and paint, and you got to pay them. So General Mills was having, because they backed Gower Productions, so they were having to pay the inkers and painters, and they didn't have any material. So Gordon Johnson told me, while I was working then at the agency with him, told me to go out and find a new creative team, and I did myself. And Chet. So that's how we got in business.
Did you tell him how you did that?
It's in the book.
It's in the book, but it's a real hoot, because I met a gentleman outside who's one of the authors or creatives here, and he was talking about how his daughter was trying to get in the business, and I just thought this was fantastic that
we got into business illegally is how we got into business. I mean, I would be going out to General Mills pitching a show like King Leonardo and his short subjects and telling them how great it was and how great this new company was, Total Television Production. Only I never told them it was my company.
A little conflict of interest, but there you go.
But it's a conflict of interest, but the reason we never felt bad about it is because we knew we were making tremendous money for General Mills. They could never have gotten a show like that at a cost like that. So we felt good, and they have since made beaucoup dollars out of the shows, all of our shows. So we felt very good about that. They know now. We told them after the fact. And I had the approval of one of the top guys out there anyway. I told Lowry Kreitz, who was head of all serials. So we were a little illegal, but not quite. Maybe more like a wink.
But
great. Anything else?
Question. How many episodes of Underdog from the original series were created?
Well, it's different because, you know, they were four-parters. So about 100 episodes, but more limited in terms of the number of shows. Actually, we did, in all of our series, we did about 400 episodes.
Rode every one of them.
Yes,
And
Chet and I.
Did you
Chet
tell
and
how
I.
you did that? How you used to drive halfway and?
Chet lived in Litchfield. I lived on the Cape. The reason we picked the 1812 house in Framingham is because it was supposedly about the closest thing to the midway point, except that he drove at 80 miles an hour and I drove at 60. So it's different. Actually got stopped by the police just because of the car he was driving. I didn't know that happened. He was driving something called a TR, and cops would stop him just, even if he wasn't speeding, they just think anybody driving this kind of car is bound to be breaking the speed limit. Anything else?
Just one other question. I know that a couple of years after Underdog, when Batman was big, there were a couple of shows like Batman that the other networks were trying to come up with. And I can't remember whether it was Mr. Terrific or Captain Nice. And they objected to the fact that he took a pill to get his powers. Now, of course, this was a couple of years later. You never got that was one of the reasons that show got canned.
Yeah, we got letters, but you got to understand, we got letters from mothers saying, "Stop your show because my child is jumping off a chair," you know, and like Underdog, trying to be under. So we got some that said, "Kid is taking aspirin, you know, taping aspirin to his finger and taking the pill," and they sold some of the rings. The rings were sold by a merchandising outfit. So for a while we soft pedaled the ring, and also it had originally been a secret compartment in my ring I filled with a Underdog super vitamin pill, and we cut the vitamin because the mother said they were eating vitamin pills like candy. So we went to Underdog secret energy pill, super energy pill. So we made that change.
Could I inject a little piece? Oh,
could I
come
stop
on.
you?
Wait a minute. Do you need a secret? Wait a minute. Here's a vitamin pill right here. Take that. This is a question that I'm actually throwing out on behalf of your partner, Chet Stover, whom I asked once about one of his very favorite moments in all of the years that these two cohorts in crime had so much fun. And I said, what was one of your favorite moments? And I'll precede this by saying it had to do with Tennessee, TUXEDO, and it had to do with a call that you received from Berkeley, I believe, in California.
Wanted the series, and so some episode of, I think it was the machines, the simple machines. That was an episode of Tennessee Tuxedo, and the professor wanted to know if he could have a copy of it, so he could use it in his class.
Professor
Physics.
Professor.
Whoopi. That's not his name.
And what did he say?
No, the guy from the university wanted to be able to use the piece from, that was Phineas J. Whoopi, who, "Oh, Tennessee, let me get the 3D BB."
There. That's what I was going for.
Okay.
But I thought that was,
Please.
but Chet thought that was incredible.
Yes,
that
he's very proud.
He said the professor
My
told
partner's an
him.
overeducated guy, and so he was so proud that a college professor called him
And
wanted to
said, in fact, that his students understood that whatever law of physics better by your little piece with Professor J. Whoopi. And so, any other trivia questions? Anyone have a, yes?
What was the year of the first episode?
What?
The year.
When did the first broadcast?
Of Underdog, it was, let's see, June 63. I think we made it, September 63.
Go ahead.
I wanted to know, is it true that the Underdog balloon in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade was the first horizontal one? And secondly, can you talk about your forgotten TV show, The Beagles?
Okay, can I just say one thing? I told you wrong. Tennessee debuted in 63. Underdog debuted in 64. I don't know about being the first perpendicular. I really don't. And your second question was?
It was about the Beagles.
Oh, well, The Beagle, the Beagle isn't mentioned in the book. The Beagles was the first series that we didn't sell outright. We still own it. It's unfortunately, the people for whom we wrote that series, Deluxe Toys, that was our sponsor, and I still have a telegram from Fred Silverman at CBS saying to us, your show is a smashing success, and it was a smashing success. It was, of course, the Beagles were two dogs who were a musical trio, and I wrote the songs. They did one song for each 4 episodes, and I wrote those. So the trouble was that we only wrote 9 episodes, and the president of Deluxe Toys absconded to Mexico with all the company's money, like $9 million or something, and we had no sponsor, and just went kaput. The series was dropped, and once you have that, it's tough to sell. It's like, just like any other kind of thing. Once they know you've been turned down or something, and they didn't know the whole story, and we wouldn't tell people the story. So the business had changed then, and so we left the business, and that was our last series. Did that really answer it?
But I love that you made that comment, because there have been so many things that have come back that, aside from a movie where Underdog, the balloon is being shot, and
Well, the balloon was shot down.
but
Actually. Bullet holes in it.
I don't know if any of you saw the Woody Allen film, but
Where Underdog is in the storage place where he goes, and they look at Underdog.
and we're often being called because of someone, whether it's Tom Hanks or TV announcer, or I guess Rosie O'Donnell had a guest who, and I met Bill Murray, aside from Tom Hanks, who were huge Underdog fans. And we have this nonprofit which every year on October 29th, which it's obviously not about one day, but we have this event which Underdog is our mascot. It's called Positive People Day, and in the city of Boston, but we hope you'll all spread the word, because it's just about being kind. And once, when I mentioned something to someone in the city of Boston, a man came up. He was dressed in the most glorious 3-piece suit I think I'd ever seen. He said, "Underdog? Are you kidding? Underdog?" And I said, "Well, if you
We
were
were on the street in
yeah, we were
Downtown Crossing,
passing out,
passing out
and the creator of co-creator of
this is-
Underdog is passing out these adorable little Underdog leaflets which say, be positive, smile, and do something
Anyhow,
nice.
the guy said to her, said he was a big Underdog fan. She said, "Would you like to meet the co-creator of Underdog?" So the guy, he said, "Oh yeah." So he came over and he said, I'll show you how big a fan I am." And he starts taking off his clothes.
His jacket, his
Took off
vest,
his jacket, his vest, and his shirt, and he's got a huge tattoo of Underdog.
and that doesn't
I was
hold
about ready to run.
And that does not hold a candle to when, in the book, there's a much better story than I can tell, but I was there. And so I'll, for any of you who've already read this, forgive me, but when I went to the Hasty Pudding event in Cambridge, where they honor every year at Harvard some great actor and actress who's contributed to the field of film. And one year it was Tom Hanks, and I happened to be in the
press.
Not a press person, so to speak, but I was there and asked a question of Tom Hanks, and I qualified it because of our nonprofit by mentioning the creation of Underdog.
You didn't just mention the creation of Underdog. You said that old cartoon character.
Hates that. Do you by any chance remember that old cartoon character? Excuse me, Underdog. Well, did I know? I hadn't even finished the word underdog when all of a sudden Tom Hanks, sitting just right here, and I'm sitting right there, looked at me, he said, "Underdog?" And by the way, Dixie Watley, a lovely person in Boston, she used to be a big arts active anchor for one of the big networks, had just asked him a question, and he's like, "Oh, good Lord, I don't want any
He
more
looked
of these."
very tired. He'd
You
had
know,
a
it
rough
was like,
day.
"Oh, good Lord, how many more of these draining, you know, about my past and my this and the that?" And so I mentioned Underdog, and he says, "Underdog? Underdog? You mean, excuse me, when in this world the headlines read of those whose hearts are filled with greed, who rob and steal from those," and then all of a sudden he says, "Everyone, hey,
Sing the song.
underdog, underdog, speed of lightning, roar," and the whole place, and we had all of the press of all, we had CBS, CNN, everybody, and they were all dropping their cameras, everybody's falling all over the place, and it was just so enrolling, and I will tell you, and I don't know what he said before I came in here, I'm sorry, thought we were doing this at 2, and so forgive me, but I will promise you this, when I addressed this little group, it was amazing about Tom Hanks making the statement, and I called Buck, whose real name is Watts Biggers, but I called him Buck Biggers, and I said, "Excuse me, but do you know that Tom Hanks is one of your biggest fans?" And he said, "Oh, you know, I wrote that so many years ago, and that is why I say to you about Underdog, humble and lovable." Humble. He gave the world a gift. We have a nonprofit which uses this.
And on that note, I think
No.
unless you have
Any more? Okay. All right. So last, if there is another trivia question on the planet. So,
Okay.
ow, ow, ow. Could I ask, could we just do, since he wrote the music,
What?
when we'll close with,
When in this world the headlines read of those whose hearts are filled with greed, who rob and steal from those who need, then to this spot with blinding speed goes Underdog,
Underdog.
Underdog, speed of lightning, roar of thunder, fighting all who rob or plunder. Underdog, bum 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 bum, Underdog.
bravo. Anyone who would like, we'll gladly sign any books that you'd like.